Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Today I have a story for you that, frankly, I dread bringing to you. I'll be honest, I tend to skip over these types of stories because I just can't stomach them. They're too painful and too horrific to talk about. But if I continue to do that, I'm a hypocrite because I'm always talking about how important it is that we discuss even the most unsavory of crimes because we don't find solutions to problems by not talking about them. We only find solutions to problems by discussing them. And this problem is just getting bigger and bigger. The murder at the heart of this story took place a week ago. By the time you see this, it will be 2 weeks. You know, I'm not a big fan of trigger warnings. We are all responsible for our own triggers. And if you're on a true crime channel, I'm assuming you're okay with dark content. That said, this is a rough one. Rough actually isn't the right word. This is nightmare fuel for any parent, any grandparent. Today, we are talking about the murder of 6-year-old Chance Crawford. When asked about him, everyone who knew him agrees he was an angel. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin.
God is so good. And if you're obedient and you listen to what he's telling you to do, you're going to change lives.
The man you just saw talking about God is Ernest Lamar Love, who, if guilty of what he is accused of, is an actual monster. And it's very much looking like he is guilty. But for the purposes of today's discussion, this is all alleged. Ernest is 41 years old and he works as a barber in Placentia, California, which is about 35 miles southeast of Los Angeles. Ernest Love is a longtime member of a Lake Elsinore church called Amazing Church. He has been attending that church for over a decade, but Ernest was problematic. In fact, he had been recently suspended from Amazing Church due to inappropriate relationships with women. According to members at Amazing Church, it was well known that Ernest had multiple relationships going on at once and that he was lying to several of the women about those relationships being exclusive. One member said, every few months, Ernest would have a different woman there at church. That was Ernest's MO. I guess he would meet women through the barbershop or maybe at a club, and he would tell them he was a godly man and that he wanted to take them to church with him. Even more disturbing is that Ernest worked as a minister within that church. He had been going to this church for so long that he'd actually worked his way up to being one of the ministers. Who was he working with? Children. He was working as a children's minister. People in the church who observed Ernest working with children had concerns. They said of him, quote, he was kind of stern. He would get angry about certain things. You could see it on him, but I never saw him take it out on the kids. Well, you wouldn't see that in a church because if you did, he would be in jail. Predators and abusers aren't going to be abusive in public. That is why we must learn to see red flags and we must learn to pay attention to red flags. We need to be willing to dig a little deeper when we get that feeling that something's a little off here. No abuser or dangerous person is going to openly act in their perverse manner around other normal adults. But there will be red flags, and it's up to us to watch for those red flags and watch for the signs. This is why we have to talk about this. I'm not blaming this church or church members for what eventually happens, but I am saying that obviously people saw some red flags. People saw that Ernest had some anger issues and, nobody stepped in. And that is what we've got to do better on. Ernest Love, known for being a womanizer, then decided, well, if I keep meeting these women on the streets or, out in public and bringing them to church, I'm never going to overcome this reputation. So what does he do? Well, like all good con men, he adapts. He changes his method of operation when he sees that the one he's using is not effective. Ernest decides to start dating women within the church, and he specifically starts to date this woman who was already a member. Ernest meets Charlene Sephora, who was also a longtime member at Amazing Church. Charlene is a beautiful woman with a gorgeous little 6-year-old boy named Chance Crawford. Charlene worked at St. Joseph's Hospital, and she often worked the night shift. As you can see from these photos, Charlene loved her son Chance and provided him with birthday parties and new school clothes and made sure that he was well taken care of. Chance's father is a man named Vance Crawford. He is pictured here with his son. You can see how adorable Chance is, and it appears that he is much loved and doted on. I couldn't find much information on Vance and Charlene's relationship, whether or not they were co-parenting amicably, but we do know that they were not together as a couple. As Charlene and Ernest grew closer, she would leave Chance with Ernest for Ernest to babysit and help out. Like I said, Ernest was a barber. I had a hard time verifying his place of employment, but there were several articles that had this photo attached, Hidden Beauty Salon, so I'm pretty sure this is where Ernest worked. It looks like he had a large group of friends at the barbershop, and from everything I was able to gather, the place was pretty popular. All the photos look like it's busy all the time, and Ernest made decent money there. Well, just a few days ago, Charlene dropped Chance off at Ernest's barbershop so Ernest could watch the little boy after school because Charlene had to work the night shift at the hospital. Charlene drives Chance to Ernest's place around 6:30 in the evening and left him there. Charlene says Ernest had become a trusted person in her son's life, that he had helped him with fears that he had. Ernest had tried to boost the little boy's confidence, teaching him how to play ball and things like that. Talking to him about the world. And I guess the little boy had some things he was scared of. Ernest would try to talk him through those things. And he would send Snapchat videos to Charlene showing him and Chance interacting to show, he was working with the boy and that he cared for him. Well, when Charlene drove away, she had no idea that the next few hours of her little boy's life, this is where it's going to get bad. At some point in the evening, Ernest took Chance to a park near the barber shop. As they were playing, Chance had an accident. He wet his pants. Now, I'm going to go into this because I think this is a big deal and something we've got to talk about. Kids get playing, especially at a park or somewhere that has a lot of distractions. And sometimes they just forget to go to the bathroom. They literally forget. They get so busy playing. And also, a lot of kids have FOMO, fear of missing out, and they don't want to stop playing and go to the bathroom. That is really common. And before you know it, they've peed their pants. It just happens. It is not a big deal. I wish I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self that when I was potty training my oldest daughter, because I would get mad about things that I shouldn't get mad about. I mean, hell, the mistakes that I made. I will never forget when John and Patsy Ramsey were interviewed after JonBenét's murder. And the reporter brought up the theory that Patsy beat JonBenet because JonBenet had had an accident. And Patsy looked at the reporter with disgust and said, "I have survived stage 4 cervical cancer. You think I care about a kid wetting the bed?" And that was such a genuine and convincing answer to me. She was so blatantly annoyed and just found the question to be so ridiculous. She was offended. Those of us who have kids, we are used to kids having accidents. It is not a big deal. But I'm going to say something very blunt. Other people's kids having accidents, we don't want to deal with that. My nieces and nephews, sure. But this is where I think we've got an issue. Other people do not love your children like you love your children. I was very lucky to get a man like Jason who treats our kids the way he does. He never hesitated. He treats our kids like he is their biological father. He never tried to replace their father, but he loves those kids like he's their biological father. I cannot tell you how many times I have had people come up to us in public and say, "Oh, what a beautiful family." And, "Oh, what cute kids you two have." They don't know that Jason is not the kid's dad. I mean, he looks a little like them and, he acts like their dad. Disciplining them? No, I always had to do that. Jason never wanted to overstep their dad's boundaries. He has a very specific relationship with them. But it is a very rare thing to find someone who is going to love your kids as much as you love them. And when little kids are throwing up and peeing and doing gross things, it's easy for other people to get annoyed. This is what I want to talk about. I am not blaming people who have to use babysitters. I used babysitters. What I am saying is that we've got to be very careful about who we choose as babysitters. Some guy that you're dating or some woman that you're dating might not be as excited about your kids as they act like they're excited when you're around. That's just the truth. There are people that will date single parents and wish they didn't have kids. That's the truth. So we've got to be really, really careful who we leave those babies with. But Charlene trusted Ernest. He had shown her in the past that he was trustworthy. I watched a bunch of the videos that Ernest would send to Charlene, and I can see how she would feel that this man had love for her son. Most likely because this man is a con artist and probably a narcissist. People like him are very good at making those around them believe whatever they want them to believe. We live among monsters, my friends. We do. And that's why talking about these issues is so important. This guy on the outside looked like a decent guy, and he is not a decent guy. And what he does next, this poor baby. Ernest gets very angry that Chase has had an accident, and he drags him from the park back to the barber shop. I'm going to be careful with the words I use here, even though this has been discussed on the news over and over. Ooh, boy. You guys often request cases that have to do with things like this, and I just don't cover them because I can't handle it. But we got to talk about it. Ernest takes a piece of raw lumber, like an unfinished board, and he begins to beat Chance with it. He beats Chance until his buttocks are open and bleeding, and there are pieces of flesh missing. Chance's face was beaten, his head, his torso, and his legs. Sorry, I don't want to go into much more detail. I don't think I can go into much more detail, but I will tell you that the beating was so severe that there were multiple injuries the boy could have died from. I feel sick right now. This piece of human garbage, Ernest, allegedly then takes a bottle of hydrogen peroxide and pours it into the open wounds. Then he instructed this little boy to start doing sit-ups and push-ups and jumping jacks. So now the child is exercising with these open bleeding wounds. Ernest forced Chase to continue until he collapsed. Did Ernest call 911? Of course not. Did he summon an ambulance? No, he did not. He tried to wake the little boy, but he could not. So he eventually drove Chance to the emergency room at Children's Hospital of Orange County, arriving at 1 a.m. in the morning on Saturday. I'm going to read you the statement from the prosecutor about what was discovered at the hospital. Doctors at CHOC discovered that much of Chance's flesh was missing from his buttocks, leaving raw gaping wounds along with subdural hematoma, extreme brain swelling, and other injuries consistent with violent shaking. I'm going to tell you guys something I maybe shouldn't say. I know we can't have two completely different justice systems. I understand that. But maybe it's time for a new category of justice. Maybe it's time to create a different category for people like Ernest Love. Give him his trial, give him his day in court. But when he is found guilty, because who in the hell else could have done this? Maybe the punishment is that he gets the same treatment he put the child through, but he gets it once a month for the duration of his sentence. That shit that's going on in San Francisco right now, gangs of thieves have basically taken over that absolutely gorgeous city and have ruined it. Now they're shooting people in broad daylight. Did you hear about that the other day? Maybe put the National Guard in the streets, and when someone is seen shooting at a tourist or robbing a store, the National Guard shoots back. Try that for a month, and let's see how quickly that stops. You guys know I do not do politics here, but if asked, I will tell you I consider myself a moderate progressive. Being progressive means I believe in trying new things, progressive ideas, things that haven't been tried before. I know a lot of people think progressive means bleeding heart snowflake. Well, they're wrong. I think we are at a stage where progressive thought should be looked at as what it is. Trying things we have not tried before, innovative things, different things, because what we are doing now is not working, and it hasn't worked in a very, very long time. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, kind of like I do here on YouTube every week. But it ain't working, my friends. So you know what? It's time to progress, to innovate, to try something new. I am hard pressed to believe that violence ever begets anything but more violence. But when we are to a stage where people are just beating kids to death in their businesses or criminals are taking over the streets, maybe that needs to be met with violence for a time. When a man does something horrific to a child, maybe that man needs his ass beat. I'm just saying, nothing ever gets accomplished with war, but one-on-one, sometimes it can be effective. I am just so sick and tired of kids suffering at the hands of horrible adults. I am so sick of it. The doctors call Chance's mother, who rushes to the hospital, and so does the pastor of Amazing Church and his wife. All of these people gather around Chance's hospital bed. I want to play you some of the things the pastor of this church has had to say, because I think he's very genuine in what he's saying. And I also think he is a good reminder that people like Ernest create a ripple effect. They affect so many other people with these horrible acts.
The grieving mother of the 6-year-old boy beaten to death with a piece of lumber is speaking exclusively to ABC7. Her son's babysitter, Ernest Love, is charged with murder and torture. Orange County reporter David Gonzalez has the heartbreaking story.
I was genuinely blindsided. I trusted him with my son.
Charlene Sephora's heart is crushed, knowing the person she believed would take care of her son, Chance Crawford, instead caused him unimaginable pain.
He died a brutal death. It was brutal. He did not deserve to go out that way.
Yes. You did that, man. See that? There's going to be a lot of stuff you're scared of, but it don't matter. You got to push through it.
Okay. This is one of the many videos Ernest Lamar Love sent to Chance's mom anytime he babysat.
He came in my son's life just as a male figure. He taught him things. He helped him overcome certain fears that my son had.
But on August 30th, Sephora's life began to crumble after she dropped Chance off at Love's barbershop in Placentia before heading off to work at St. Joseph's Hospital. Later that night, Love called to tell her he was rushing Chance to the hospital.
He did tell me that he was doing jumping jacks. He had him working out and he fell and hit his head. And that's what's hard for me, because I believed him when he told me.
Prosecutors say Love had beat the 6-year-old with a piece of lumber for wetting his pants at a park, then poured hydrogen peroxide on the open wounds and forced him to exercise until he collapsed.
How could you do this to a child? It doesn't warrant what happened.
Love, who went by Azariah, was part of Amazing Church in Lake Elsinore as a minister and prophet.
He did the right things. He helped people move. He helped give advice, he's helped people, start businesses.
But he had been suspended from his roles due to inappropriate behavior with women. They never suspected he would be capable of doing what he's accused of.
We poured so much into him and he failed us. He failed us. He failed our faith. He failed us. He failed Charlene.
Most importantly, they say he failed Chance.
I want justice for my son because he did not deserve that.
Devastated, shocked, didn't know what to think.
He had socks on and he was doing jumping jacks and he fell and hit his head. When I got there, you could see the bulging on the side of his face. For me, it looked more than just a fall. We're consoling Charlene, and then we're over here like, man, what happened to Ernest? What? We're losing 3 people to this. We're losing 3 persons.
Listening to Charlene talk about how her son died broke my heart. I feel for this mother. She didn't do anything that thousands of other mothers don't do every day. She entrusted her child to someone she was in a relationship with, someone that she had come to trust. Ernest tried to lie and say that Chance was wearing slippery socks on the barbershop floor and that he started doing jumping jacks and slipped because of his socks and that he fell and hit his head. This lying piece of shit, like anyone is going to believe that. Something else you should know, shaken baby syndrome, you can never, ever, ever explain that away. There is only one way to get the very specific type of vascular damage that occurs when a baby is shaken to death. Doctors can always tell when a child has been violently shaken because shaking is the only way to cause this specific type of damage that the child either gets brain damage from or dies. I remember my dad, when he became a judge, he saw a lot of sad stuff in his courtroom, and these parents would try to come in and BS and say they hadn't shaken their child. And he's like, you can't lie your way out of this. There's only one way to get those injuries in the neck. One way. And it's shaking. It's like strangulation when the hyoid bone is broken and the eyes have petechial hemorrhage. Shaking is very easy to detect. This baby didn't slip and fall, and Ernest, this monster, knew that. But as you guys know, these guys are always the smartest people in the room, and they believe they can talk their way out of anything. Poor Chance lay in a coma, and all of the tests were run. It became clear to the doctors that he would never wake up. There was no brain activity and no chance that brain activity would return. Too much damage had been done to his little body. After the doctors had run every test available to them and several days had passed with no change to give them any hope, they knew that Chance was gone. So Charlene made the very difficult decision to remove her son from life support, and he died. At the time I'm researching and writing this episode, it was just days ago, Tuesday, September 3rd. Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer said, while his new classmates were celebrating the end of the first week of first grade, Chance's seat in his classroom was empty as he fought for his life in a hospital bed. Words do not exist to describe the absolute terror this little boy was forced to endure, all at the hands of someone who was supposed to be protecting him, not torturing him to death. Ernest Lamar Love has been arrested and charged with 1 count of murder, 1 count of torture, and 1 count of child abuse causing death. He has pled not guilty to all 3 felony charges. Under California law, if Ernest is convicted, he faces up to life in prison. He is being held without bond. Chance Crawford, Chance's father, said, I lost a son yesterday. The anger I feel is unmatched. Daddy loves you. Chance's Aunt Destiny wrote on her Facebook page, the epitome of beautiful. The world was blessed to have experienced you. Rest easy, beloved nephew. Charlene said of her son, Chance was a light to the world he lived in. He was intelligent, lively, sharp, witty. If you knew him, you would have loved him like his entire community did. Charlene has started a GoFundMe to pay for the funeral expenses. This is what it looks like if you would like to donate. There is something else. The doctors, upon examination, found that Chance had a healing fracture on one of his shoulder blades. This was not a one-time event. He had been abused before. This smiling, happy little baby was living a horror, going to school, playing with his friends, never able to tell anyone that he was being brutalized. And now he's gone. I implore you, my friends, I beg of you, if you see something, say something. We have got to get back to being a village. We have got to get back to being people who look out for each other instead of people who hate each other. Please, if you think any child is being neglected or abused, call the authorities. If you are wrong, no harm has been done. Maybe the parents or caretakers get a wake-up call that someone thought their kids were being harmed. That's not a bad thing. And if you're right and the authorities find reason to be concerned, then you have possibly saved a life. Yep, the parents or caretakers are going to be angry. So what? I'm pretty confident in saying most of us in the true crime community are tired of watching as perpetrators' rights are put ahead of victims. And we are tired of watching children suffer at the hands of terrible adults. If you're not a terrible adult, you've got nothing to worry about. If you are a terrible adult, you should be worried about all of us because we care. And that's the way it should be. I want to send absolutely all the love to Charlene and to Vance and to all of the aunts and uncles and cousins and friends of Chance. Can you imagine what his little classmates are dealing with? Being told that Chance has been murdered, beaten to death? Can you imagine what his family is going through? I know that some of you can, and that breaks my heart. Life is so fragile and it is so precious. And I hope this episode today motivates someone to make that call if they see the red flags. We cannot continue to ignore those red flags. We've got to step out of our comfort zone and do the right thing. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Definitely not a fun story today, but we've got to talk about these things because if we don't talk about it, we have no chance of ever learning how to prevent it, how to stop it. Like the video if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. You know it helps, and you know what a tough time I am having breaking through the algo wall. I know some of you guys have been leaving the name of my channel in the comments on other channels, and I just appreciate that so much. You know, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I have 2 podcasts. This one is called Dining with Death. This is an archival series. It's just the audio taken from the videos I used to post to YouTube when the channel was called Dining with Death. This is the current podcast, Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee, and I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday, and there will be some podcast exclusive stories that you will not hear here on YouTube. You can hear both podcasts on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. Thank you to the viewer who pointed out I wasn't on Amazon. I didn't even know there was a podcast service. I'm so out of it with this stuff, you guys. I'm so out of my depth. I appreciate each and every one of you. I know you have so many options for things to watch in the true crime world, in the dark stories world, and the fact that you watch my channel means the world to me. Take care of yourselves, my friends. Stay safe and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.